Hi everyone, and welcome to a Craftin Desert Divas new release highlight featuring the ocean border dies. When you first receive your dies, they're going to come exactly like this, connected by these small metal tabs. Now for this die set, you are going to want to separate them from one another. You can do that one of two ways. You can use your wire snips and simply snip them apart from one another, or you can bend them back and forth until they just sort of fall apart from each other and the wire releases. Either way will work. Once you have all of your dies separated, you're going to be left with 5 individual dies. The first is the large wave border die. Now this has a nice large wave that it cuts out, but it also has stitching on both the top and bottom of the cutting line, which makes for some great die cut inlay techniques. There's a closer look, and that stitching does match all the other Craftin Desert Divas die stitching as well. Moving on to the smaller wave, again it's got that nice cutting line with stitching on both the top and bottom of the cutting lines. The final border die is this sea floor border. Now this has stitching on the bottom of the cutting line, but it also has some great coral images and some seaweed images coming out from that, which are just adorable. Now the final dies in this die are this little wavy die and also a little circle, which might not look like much. However, this is going to make your card interactive. These are slider elements. These are very fun and easy to use, and just a little bit later on in the video, I'll show you exactly how to put them together. Here's a final look at all the measurements of the dies. Now most of the time I will give you measurements for the actual die cuts themselves. However, I cannot do that for this die set because you can make these as long or as wide as you want to, which is a great quality for a border die set. And I'll show you how you can do that just a little bit later on in the video. So moving on to cutting with these dies, I'm going to be using my Big Kick. You can use whatever die cut machine you may have on hand that will handle wafer thin dies. For my sandwich, I'll be using the multi-purpose platform with both tabs down, a cutting plate, a piece of cardstock. This is just regular weight cardstock. And then I'll go ahead and place my die right on top of that with the cutting edge facing down. And then I'll go ahead and put my final little cutting plate right on top of that to finish off my sandwich. And then I'll go ahead and crank that through my die cutting machine. Now you can see that on the actual measurements that I gave, this die only measures 5 inches across, and I do have an A2 size panel here, which is 5.5 inches long. So it's not going to cut entirely through this, but that's okay because with these dies, you can cut a 12-inch piece of paper if you wanted to. All you need to do is a little bit more die cutting. So I went ahead and lined that up with the left side. I ran it completely through, so now I've got it cut up until about 1/2 inch on the right hand side. So in order to finish cutting that, I'm going to go ahead and put my die again down, and this stitching kind of just pops right into place. Then I can go ahead and tape this down into place just to hold it nicely and put it back through my cutting machine again. Now in this particular case, I'm just using a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch panel. But again, you can use these on your scrapbooking pages. However long you may need it to be, it will do that as long as your die cutting machine can handle it. Now, once that's done, I'll just go ahead and remove the tape. And there you can see I've got a nice finished off wave border die that goes completely across that A2 panel. Now, here's where I'm talking about longer pieces. I know some people do love to make 5x7 cards. You can accommodate that with this die set. So with this smaller wave border, I'm going to go ahead and line it up on the left hand side. You can start in the middle if you wanted to and then cut both sides. It's really up to you. I'll go ahead and run that through my die cutting machine. Then I'll go ahead and remove that die, line it up again on the left hand side, and then I'll finish off die cutting this 5x7 inch panel. Now you can see on the first one, I kind of put the wave border in the center of the panel, but on this one, I'm focusing more towards the top. So you can make these as long as you want. You can make them as wide as you want. It really is up to you. You just have to have a die cutting machine that will handle the size of paper that you want to use. Length really doesn't matter in that case, however, width kind of does. So as long as your machine can handle the width, you can make it as wide as you want. Here's a look at this coral die, all cut up and ready to go. Again, this one can be used exactly the same way. Just line it up. You can go 5x7, you can go 5x12, however you want to do it. But there's a look at both an A2 and a 5x7 panel cut with that die. Here's a closer look at the stitching and the great coral and seaweed images you get with this die. Now the large wave border die, again, you can do the same exact thing, just line it up. And with this one, you can go wide, you can go skinny, however you want to do it. It really is up to your imagination. There's a closer look at that 5x7 inch panel cut up, and that wave border die. Both the top and bottom both have stitching on it, you can see, which is a great feature of these dies. There's a closer look at both panels cut, and here's a closer look at the stitching that you do get from that die. And again, these stitching on these dies, it does match all the other stitching on the Craftin Desert Divas dies, so you don't have to search for matching stitching to go on your cards. Now finally, here's that small wave border that is included in the Ocean Borders die set. Here's a close look at the stitching. Again, it's the same on this die as all the other ones. And again, you get it both on the top and bottom of the cut line. And this is the one I showed you. You can go as wide as you want, and you can go as long as you want. And that makes these dies perfect not only for your cards, but for planners, scrapbooks, invitations, whatever you might need them for, you can make it with this die set. So not only do you get the wave border and the seafloor border in this die set, you also get this slider element, which you can use to make your cards interactive. Now this does measure 3.5 inches long by 1/4 inch tall, and this is perfect to fit on your wave borders. You don't have to necessarily use it with this die set though. You can use it in the sky, you can use it down a slide, you can use it for whatever you might want to use it for. But to make this work, you do need to just go ahead and die cut the slider element right in a piece of cardstock, and then this little circle in the die set, you need to go ahead and cut 2 of those. Now really quickly, I wanted to show you that you can make this die as long as you want as well. Now the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and place it down. This is a 5x7 inch panel that I cut with that small wave border die. I'll go ahead and place that slider element and line it up a little bit with the left hand side, about 1/2 inch away from the left hand side. I'll run that through my die cutting machine completely, and now I'm going to do a little bit of partial die cutting. I'll go ahead and line that slider element up with where it ended off, and I'll use a little bit of painter's tape just to hold it in place, and then I can go ahead and do a little bit of partial die cutting, and this is just how I place my cutting plates. So I'll go ahead and place that right down in a normal sandwich that I would use with any other die, but my top cutting plate I'm actually going to place just to where it cuts right up until that wave border ended on the first time. So I'll slide this in. You do need to kind of fidget with it a little bit. I'll flip it over so you can see it just a little bit better. But right where that ended, I'm going to put my cutting plate right up against that and run this through my die cutting machine. Now your newer cutting plates do have that bevel on them. Just make sure that you get the flat part up until that cutting point. If you have the bevel up until that cutting point, it's not going to cut all the way through. So make sure you get it until your flat part of your cutting plate is up against the end cutting mark. Now once that's done, I can go ahead and take off this slider element, and there you have it. I have made almost a 7-inch slider with this 3.5 inch die. So you can use this again on your scrapbooks, on your planners. It can be as long as you want it, and you can also do some partial die cutting and make it as short as you want it to. It really is up to you. Now in order to make this slider element, you are going to need to cut that slider element from a piece of cardstock, and then 2 of the little circles as well. You're also going to need something to slide, so I will be using this little shark image from the Jossum stamp set. I've cut an A2 size panel with the large wave border, cut that slider element right underneath where that border ends, and I've also got my 2 little circles that I've die cut, and those are from white cardstock. Now on the first circle, I'm going to go ahead and put a little squirt of glue, and then I'll put my little pop dot right on top of that. Now these are actually made for slider elements, so they don't have adhesive on them, but you can use pop dots if you don't have these. You can use fun foam if you don't have these as well. That will work just as fine. Just make sure that it will fit in that little 1/4 inch area that you have for the slider to run. Now once I have that down, I'll go ahead and place an acrylic block just to give it a nice amount of pressure so it will hold in place. Then I'll go ahead and insert that little slider element right into the track that slider die has created. And on the top of that little pop dot, I put another squirt of glue and my final little circle that I've die cut. Now that is the actual slider element. At this point, you can add whatever sort of image you want to on top of that, and it will be an interactive sliding image. I'm going to add my little shark on top of that. So in order to do that, I'll go ahead and place a little bit more glue right on the top and then place him down on top of that. And again, I will add my acrylic block on top of that just to add a little pressure so everything stays put. Now, if you do find that your little circles are a little bit maybe too wide or too long for your image that you're putting on top of them to slide, just cut them down just a bit. You want them to be wide enough to where they will stay inside that track. They're not going to slip through, but you can cut them down just a teensy bit if you need to. Now once I have that shark on there, I'll go ahead and place my acrylic block right back on top. And once everything dries, you can see just how well it does slide and everything stays in place. And there you have it, the slider element from the Craftin Desert Divas Ocean Borders die set, all put together and ready to go on a card base. And this is made so much easier with the Ocean Borders die set. Here's a closer look at that finished slider element all put together on a card. Now, the Craftin Desert Divas design teams have been very busy with this new Ocean Borders die set. Here's a look at a few of their cards to help get you inspired. The Ocean Border dies will retail for $21.99 in the Craftin Desert Divas online shop. That link will be in the description box below. These dies will be available July the 10th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thanks for watching!